The Passion and the Death of Jesus Christ.
The Annunciation.
The angel of the Lord appears to Mary, announcing the birth of a child, which shall be called the Son of God. In this quiet and sacred moment, Mary listens with humility and awe. The message marks the beginning of a divine story that will change the world forever. The strange star. Led by the light of the strange new star, the 3 wise men of the East journey to Bethlehem in search of the Holy Child, whose birth has been foretold to them. They are followed by a large retinue of servants and a train of camels, donkeys, sheep, etc., forming in all an impressive caravan. Across deserts and distant lands, their faith guides them forward. The star shines as a symbol of destiny in the dark night sky. The adoration of the wise men. The wise men and the shepherds enter the lowly stable and kneel at the feet of Mary, who holds in her arms the newborn babe. Joseph stands near and watches the touching scene. Gifts are offered with reverence and devotion. The humble setting contrasts with the greatness of the moment. Flight into Egypt. Through the lonely Egyptian desert, Mary and Joseph flee to a place of safety to preserve the life of the infant Jesus. Arriving at the famous Sphinx, Mary finds shelter for the night, while Joseph collects wood for the fire. The vast desert stretches endlessly around them. Their journey is filled with danger, yet guided by hope. Jesus and the doctors. The doctors and sages are engaged in a learned discussion when Jesus appears. They listen astounded at his words of wisdom. Mary and Joseph, who have been seeking their son, arrive and lead the child away. Even at a young age, his wisdom surpasses all expectation. Holy Family. The Holy Family works at their daily occupations. Mary at the spinning wheel, Joseph and Jesus at the carpenter's bench. Joseph is teaching the boy his trade. Their lives are simple and filled with quiet purpose. In these moments, a foundation of humility and devotion is formed. At the wedding feast, the guests are seated at the table enjoying the festival. When it is discovered that there is no more wine, Jesus commands the servants to bring jars of water and performs his first miracle by turning the water into wine, after which all present do him homage. Joy returns to the celebration. This moment reveals the beginning of his divine power. Jesus and the woman of Samaria. A group of women is gathered around the well, filling their jars with water. The last arrival is a woman of Samaria, notorious for her wicked character. Christ appears to her and grants her forgiveness for her sins. In this moment, mercy triumphs over judgment. Christ's miracle with the bread. A multitude of people is gathered around Christ to hear him preach. At midday he takes 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes and feeds the assembly. The crowd witnesses a miracle of abundance. Faith is strengthened among those who see it. Entrance into Jerusalem. The people throng to the city gates and await the entry of their Savior. When he appears riding on an ass, they greet him with loud hosannas and wave palm branches. The city fills with excitement and hope. A king arrives not in power, but in humility. Jesus driving the sellers from the temple. The merchants are assembled in the temple selling their wares when Jesus enters and, overturning the tables of the money lenders, drives them before him. He shows them the error of their ways, and they are penitent. The temple is restored to its sacred purpose. Justice replaces corruption. The Lord's Supper. Seated at a long table, we see Christ and the 12 apostles partaking of the Lord's Supper. Blessing the wine, he gives it to them and breaking a piece of bread, he presents it to Judas, saying that this man shall betray him. A shadow falls over the gathering. The moment is both sacred and tragic. Jesus in the Garden of Olives. Jesus is in the Garden of Olives, praying for strength to do the Father's will. He is almost overcome by the thought of the terrible suffering which he must endure when an angel appears and he is comforted. The night is heavy with sorrow, yet he finds the strength to continue. The disciples who have been told to keep watch are asleep on the ground while Jesus prays. Christ awakens them with mild reproach for their negligence just as Judas arrives. The traitor kisses Jesus, at which signal the centurions arrest him and his followers. Silence is broken by betrayal. Destiny begins to unfold. Jesus before Pilate. Christ and Barabbas, a thief, are brought before Pilate, who, after examining them, pronounces Christ innocent. But the people cry out, "Crucify him and release unto us Barabbas." The crowd's voice grows louder and more relentless. Justice is overruled by fear and anger. Scourging Jesus. Christ's raiment is torn from him, and he is bound to a stake. The multitude is allowed to scourge and mock him, even spitting in his face. The suffering is brutal and unrelenting, yet he endures in silence. A crown of thorns is then pressed down upon his forehead. They drape him in a royal purple robe. A palm is placed in his hand for a scepter, and they hail him king with mocking shouts. Cruelty is disguised as mockery. The scene reveals the depths of human scorn. Jesus being brought before him again, Pontius Pilate washes his hands to show that he has no part in this just man's death and delivers him to the mob. The final decision is made. Innocence is abandoned to the will of the crowd. Jesus sinking under the cross. Jesus is forced to bear the heavy cross along the toilsome path to Calvary. His feeble strength fails him, and he sinks under the weight. Here they meet Simon, a Cyrenian, who helps him to carry the cross. The brutal soldiers hurry them on with blows and kicks. Every step is a struggle toward sacrifice. Saint Veronica wipes the sweat from his brow with a white cloth, upon which a likeness of his face appears on its surface. The miracle leaves a silent testimony behind. Even in suffering, divinity is revealed. Crucifixion. Christ is stripped of his clothing and nailed to the cross, which is to be erected on the hillside between two crucified thieves. The sky darkens as the moment unfolds. Humanity witnesses its most tragic act. Death of Christ. As the final moments arrive, Christ gives his last breath upon the cross. The world falls into silence. Darkness seems to fall upon the earth as the weight of this moment is felt by all who witness it. A sacrifice is completed that will echo through eternity. For more mysterious, historical, and intriguing content, like the video and subscribe to the Unsolved Legends channel. Don't forget to subscribe.